All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If anybody else is in, we'll let them in. Thank you, everybody, for joining the second annual volunteer training. We're excited to do this. A couple of times are offered today, so I appreciate those who come in and join on Zoom. So yeah, we'll get started. So just for today, the agenda, we're going to start with just talking about the town structure. Ryan's going to give an overview about the town budget and town meeting. I'll talk a little bit about the volunteer chair roles and responsibilities. Gretchen's going to talk about open meeting law and ethics. And then I'll talk about the appointment and resignation process, a little bit about finance that volunteers and chairs should know. And then just an overview about the tech in this room, Zoom, because that's kind of been updated, and then website guidelines for the different boards that you represent.
Hey, Aubrey, who are you?
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm Aubrey Thomas, the Assistant Town Administrator, for those who haven't met me. So nice to meet you all, and thank you all so much for becoming volunteers here, for those who are new, and then those who have been volunteers for a long time. Thank you so much for your continued commitment. Really do appreciate it, and on this rainy day, joining us right now. So actually, if you want to start, Ryan, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ryan McClain. I'm your town administrator here in Carlisle, and I'm going to talk about position exists and then where your volunteer positions exist within the town. So this isn't intended to be a civics lesson. It's more to inform you why things are the way they are in the government structure. But it's a little bit of a civics lesson. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so this is the Massachusetts Constitution, and in Article 2 of the Articles of Amendment, of course, written by the great John Adams, the state government has the ability to create a municipality. So they did create the town of Carlisle. Why this is important in terms of authority is if you do not change the general law or the Constitution, then you are a statutory town, meaning the general court has control over your town. That'll make sense in a second. All right, so let's use the example of the Board of Health. Doesn't jump around, so the Massachusetts general laws established the ability for towns to create boards of health in order to govern public health. All right, this is in Massachusetts general law, and it states specifically here that the Board of Health has the ability to hire people in order to perform their functions or delegate their authority. So here in Carlisle, the Board of Health has control over its agents. So anybody that works for the Board of Health is the appointing authority for that employee. Right? If the Massachusetts general law does not state that you have that authority, then you don't have the ability to control your authority, and everything diverts to the select. So when we go to the town structure, you'll see the select board has control over everybody unless it is specifically stated in the Mass General Law that that authority exists. So you may have heard in many things in Carlisle that there is something called siloing, or the inability to create plans between different boards. The structure of the town is kind of lent to that. So each board and committee that has its own authority has been operating under its own authority for years. And the idea of coming together, it can be difficult, especially when there's disagreement. So Carlisle is a statutory town, meaning we defer to the state in terms of our structure. The only way to change that is to amend Massachusetts general law through a charter or a special act bylaw. So a special act bylaw in this particular example would say, we would like the Board of Health agent to be hired by the library, right? You would petition the court and say, we'd like to change Mass General Law in order for the appointing authority of the Board of Health agent to be the library. And they usually say yes. And then you have this weird town structure where that exists. Right? Ideally, you would have more thought behind why you were trying or not trying to consolidate power. The best way to do that is with a charter. A charter is basically a town constitution for a town amendment, but it does change a lot, and it changes a lot of power structures, so it can be pretty controversial. That's why the structure is the way it is when I show it to you in a second. Most of you exist in your volunteer positions because of town bylaws or something that the select board created. Right, so I use Christina because she chose to sit next to me. She is on the Environmental Sustainability Committee. There is nothing in Mass General Law that creates such a board. That board exists only because the select board wanted to create a committee or board to advise them. Right, so the full authority for the environmental sustainability comes from the select board. Without the select board, they would not have that authority. So they are reporting to the select board, and if they were to get staff, which I'm sure they do have some type of staff, it is through the select board's power that they have. Right. Other examples include the safety committee, the cemetery task force, the transfer station action committee are all creatures of the select board. And each board and committee in town can also create subcommittees and other boards if they want to. All right, so I'm going to give you a really weird example and confuse the whole room. So the Conservation Commission, they exist because at some point town meeting said we would like a conservation commission. So they accepted a Mass General Law that allows the town to have a conservation commission. But once you create the Conservation Commission, they have their own authority under the Federal Wetlands Protection Act. So once created by the town, then they have their own authority to hire, fire, and enact things that would protect the wetlands in their areas. And then they've created several subcommittees. However, they are still appointed by the select board. So the select board has the ability to appoint everybody on the conscom and their sub creations, but they have no authority to change or say what the Conservation Commission does. Okay, sounds a lot like our Congress, right? Creates good situations, bad situations, and other situations, but it is helpful to know. So town bylaws are allowed as long as they don't contradict the general law and the Constitution. So Carlisle can say, this is how we operate as long as it doesn't interfere with those two things. Still got everybody? Any questions on that? You might continue along, please. All right, I want to show you some key documents and sources if you want to go down some of these rabbit holes. So I'm going to share again. If you go to the town website, which I'm doing here. And this isn't like a one and done thing. If you want me to show it to you individually or slow it down, I'm absolutely willing to do this. So this is the Town of Carlisle website. I've tried to set it up so that if you go to my page, Town Administrator, my office, you have several different things that you can see here. And town policies is one of them. Okay, so every town policy we think that we have put on this page from the select board. Financial policies, environmental policies, land use policies, etc. So some of these policies are one pages and some of them are the town bylaws, which is obviously a significant amount of policy. And then we have some calling reports and information. Okay, and this includes some big organizational studies and guiding documents like the master plan. So I think most people here have heard of the master plan. The master plan is, if Carlisle was going to decide what it wants to be when it grows up in 20 years, this is the guide map to that, right? So most of the decisions that the select board are informed by not only the citizenry, but this master plan or this idea of how can we organize ourselves. Some other things that are on here are housing production plan, the town governance task force, some shared services investigations, and some things we've added recently like road maintenance planning. Trying to put everything into a plan. And then some budget information as well, which I'll get to in a second. So everything to do with the town budget is on here, including a new creation we've done, which is a budget book. I have it bookmarked in the wrong spot here. Now it's just doing whatever it wants. So this is everything you want to know from every dollar that's allocated to the departments to a higher level. Why was this decision made and where does it fit into that into the larger context. Stop sharing if you want to go back. Right, so these are some of the things that I would want to know if I was a volunteer. So the town website has a lot of information for self-service in case staff isn't available. The bylaws are generally what allows you to exist and governs your processes and procedures, besides best practice and learned practice. And then policies and procedures are things that have been passed by the town that guide a lot of what you say. So someone will say to you, we do it this way. Well, you probably do it that way because of a policy or procedure that was passed before that may or may not need to be amended or updated. And the same thing with the master plan. The master plan guides a lot of policy creation and the like. And lastly, for this particular slide, we have a variety of information sharing mechanisms now to include the town website, staff, but also online sources and social media, where we send information about what we're doing, and you should too. So if you want to be an advocate for your particular board and committee, you can communicate through Aubrey, and we can send information out via the many vehicles we have, including newsletters, online information sharing, etc. So the one thing that we hate as staff is when someone comes to town meeting and they say, this is the first I've heard of this. That really bothers us because we spend a lot of time trying to share information. So we're trying to share with you where you can find information so you can make informed decisions. So believe it or not, what our goal is to give you all the information so that you as boards and committees can guide the town and make decisions. We're here to just enact the things that you want to do. Slide. Okay, this is a bit of an eye chart, and it's not meant to really dial things in, but if you look at the top there, the dark green, okay, those are your elected boards. So select board, your moderator, planning board, board of assessors, board of health, library trustees, and the school committee, which has its own authorities. Everything in the left grouping are what we call our MGL boards, the ones that are created by Mass General Law. So at some point, the town said, we want this, we accept this law by town meeting vote, and then that now exists. And everything in the middle there is Carlisle specific. So select board or some other board has created all of these boards and committees to help govern the town and create policy and advisory type options. So you exist somewhere in this town structure. And it's important to know, because if you want to make big changes, you'll have to know legally how to do that. So if you fall under the select board, you have to get the select board to make that decision. If you fall under the Mass General Law boards, then you need to follow Mass General Law and or potentially change it in order to change your structure, which are significant and difficult things to do. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here is, and you're going to see Carlisle is a very flat structure, right? This is the town staff and associated boards. Okay, so anything with a green bubble means that. Thought there's a question, sorry. And please, if there's a question at any time, stop me. I know that some of this can be a little civics heavy. So the green bubbles are appointing authorities that exist outside of the select board. So that appointing authority with the arrow down to that staff member, they are in control of hiring, firing, and guiding those staff members, unless it's been delegated to someone else, which it can be. Everything else is under the select board by Mass General Law. Okay, so the select board has delegated most of its authority for employees to me, with the exception of the police chief, the fire chief, and the town clerk, and still undecided on the assistant town administrator. Okay, so those 4 positions are still being discussed as to where they would exist. They want to retain the ability to directly hire, evaluate, and fire if necessary those employees. All of their employees have been delegated to me. Unless they are under one of those green bubbles, then I have to work with that board and the select board in order to manage that employee, which sometimes works really well, sometimes it does not, depending on the various functions. So when we say we're a statutory town, that's sort of the result of being a statutory town, is this idea that power is diffuse and flat. And that's reading all the history of Carlisle and discussions generally what the town wants to be. And that's what you are. Next slide, please. I'm gonna stop there. I think it's important to know where you exist in the puzzle. And I know I talk a little fast sometimes. So are there any questions on the structure or where you fit, or any questions on why John Adams created this state the way he did? Because I don't know. Interestingly, one of the top, if you actually read the Massachusetts Constitution, one of the number one things that John Adams focused on was education, right? Which is why Massachusetts is constantly fighting about education funding, because it considers itself to be a top priority in Massachusetts education. That's John Adams' fault, right? So all the fights about school budgets, not really here, but in other towns, can be directly related to John Adams putting it in like the first sentence of the Constitution. I think that's interesting. And also why we have one of the best education systems in the country, arguably. All right, no questions? No questions on structure. Okay, there are some conversations happening at the select board level about structure. So I told you I would talk about my position. So the chief executive of the town is often a talking point in any municipality in the Commonwealth. So how much authority to put in the chief executive of the chief executive board, which is the select board. They're discussing a town administration, not just them, it's also come up in the master plan and the governance task force. So it's not related necessarily to me or the current select board, but lots of conversations about codifying some of the authority the select board has in a chief executive officer. So the Mass General Law does not actually directly reference town managers and town administrators. That's been patched together and created as towns decide how to govern themselves. So almost all the other positions are discussed, and the chief executive is still up in the air. Reason being, Americans typically do not like chief executives. Okay, so the authority invested in one person has been discussed since the revolution, right? So it's not surprising that each town would grapple with that decision, and that's being discussed now. So that's an interesting focus point for almost all the boards and committees is what role I play in my position plays in your function. So something to definitely look into and make sure that you understand. All right, good. So now I'm going to talk quickly about the town budget and process. So each board and committee has its own power, which we just discussed about, but you all have lives and jobs and some volunteerism, and I heard some reluctant volunteerism. Maybe your wife doesn't want you to volunteer as much as you do. So a lot of that then falls on the staff to execute your stuff. So your primary source to get to staff is Aubrey. Okay, she can help guide and point staff in your direction if necessary or not, if it's not needed. So this town relies heavily on its volunteerism in order to supplement staff, but we have built up enough staff capacity to help. So part of that is because of budget constraints and budget concerns, as you can imagine. So people are the most expensive part about our town government. So if your boards and committees are looking for more staff, then it's probably going to be a discussion with the finance committee, select board, and myself in terms of staffing in order to make sure that staffing and budgeting is fairly spread across all the boards and committees. But we're trying to make sure that everybody has some access to staff so that you can get your stuff done. And the volunteerism in this town is great. It's existed for a couple hundred years without staff, right? So we have the ability to do things without staff, but obviously staff makes things more efficient and is helpful. So understanding the budget process is key in order to execute your stuff. So capital planning is the current focus of the select board and the finance committee, not that the operating budget isn't a big concern. So operating is how we function day to day, and capital are the physical investments in the town that allow that operation to continue. So the big capital planning discussions right now are building planning, updating our buildings, building new buildings, making sure the buildings we have are good. And then horizontal construction, which is culverts and roadways, and making sure all of those things are good. It's the primary way that people interface with the town, is driving on the roads and making sure they don't get taken away in a flood. And then the vehicles and other investments that are needed to perform town functions, police, fire, DPW. So capital planning, capturing capital planning and understanding in a 5 to 10 year lens allows the the select board to make decisions about tax rate and other implications that residents really care about. So we're really grappling with capital planning and trying to get a hold of that so we can make informed decisions. Operating, which is where most of you live, it is about how to fund your activities and your staff over the long term without really digging into the capital expenses that are needed to maintain the town and to control the tax rate. So we do that like this. In the fall, we focus on financial forecasting and capital planning, and we present that to the select board and the finance committee, and they create goals. So based off what they see coming in terms of costs, here is the goals that go to the departments in order to create their budgets. In early December, departments submit their budgets to me. I assemble a draft and give it back to the finance committee, saying, here's what everybody wants and here's where it fits into your goals. Now you take it and do trade-offs and other discussions about where the budget should go. And then anything supplementary to the budget would come through warrant articles. Warrant articles is, we would like to fund this, so we're going to go directly to the taxpayers and ask them at town meeting. The finance committee and the select board deliberate. Obviously, there's a lot to what I'm just saying right now, but deliberate, and then a final budget, hopefully a consensus budget, is brought to the town meeting in April or May. The only caveat to this is the school committee. So the school committee has its own budgeting authority and its own rules on budgeting. So we talked about John Adams's fault. So that has to be worked out, and there's a lot of agreement in Carlisle, but not every town has that level of agreement, and it doesn't mean it'll always be that way. So the school committee can bring their funds directly to town meeting without the select board and the finance committee, but it obviously is much better if everyone's on the same page. And then that all that all ends at town meeting, where the townspeople get to vote. So any town that's under 6,000 people in Massachusetts, you have to have open town meeting, which means anyone can go. Any town over 6,000 can have representative town meeting, where you'd say pick 150 from the town to make the decisions for everybody, like the legislature. So Carlisle's 10-15 years from being able to make that decision. Like, okay, there are 2 town meetings in Carlisle, one in the fall. This one this year is going to be November 12th. That's the fall town meeting. The select board, although it's not codified, prefers to only do bylaws and non-financial decisions in the fall. And then all financial decisions are made in the spring, just for consistency. They don't want residents to be surprised that a big financial decision is being made in the fall. They want them to all be in the spring if possible. There might be exceptions to that in the coming years as they consider big budget decisions like buildings. But they are trying to stick to the annual town meeting being all financial decisions. It's a town meeting warrant, this might come up. So if you want to do something that requires the residents to vote on it, which is most structural changes or big financial investments, then you need to submit an article to the select board for them to put on the warrant. The warrant is all of the requests of the town in one document. And then that's what goes to town meeting for a vote. And they will fight you on it in most cases, not because they disagree with what you're saying, but because it may or may not fit into the big picture financially or otherwise. And then town meeting, the moderator this year scolded town meeting. I don't know if you were there, but wants boards and committees to, as we centralize a lot of functions, things can get a little more efficient, right? Well, the moderator wants more weigh-in from boards and committees on some of these warrant articles and decisions at town meetings, so residents hear directly from them, not someone like me or a staff member or a select board member. So there may be a little pressure on boards and committees to be more involved in the town meeting process. So he's elected, so you can decide whether or not he's right on that, but he did scold everybody. Yes.
This might be nuanced, but the fall town meeting is a special meeting. Is there a particular reason for that?
That it's a special meeting?
Correct.
So it's a special town meeting because Mass General Law only requires the annual. So anything else is a special, unless you have a charter that says you have required town meeting, and we don't, we're statutory now.
Okay.
That matters because special town meetings have different voting thresholds and
Right.
timelines than an annual town meeting, so that is
And
important.
signatures required on petitions and stuff.
So Carlisle has made it very easy for someone to get something in front of town meeting. Some towns put a really high bar, like you gotta get hundreds of signatures in order to bring something. There's other towns where one person can put something on the town meeting. I forget, where is it, Arlington, where they have like a whole night of just like citizen X wants you to think about this, right? So Carlisle doesn't want that, but they don't want like a high bar either, so kind of like easy to enter, but not like crazy Arlington. Not that if you guys make that decision, that's your call. It is a little crazy. Alright, so that's the end of me. Alright, so that's structure, budget, and sort of big picture planning. Any questions on any of that? Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, so this kind of summarizes just really what Ron's already talked about. Or that you're meeting regularly with your board, and to vote or advise as needed, depending on what your role is. It's really important to understand what your authority or advisory role is, depending on your board and, you know, and what that looks like. So I definitely recommend making sure you understand the charter for the board you're on. If you have any questions, feel free to. And then there's the public body member handbook, which, you know, I'll follow up with this PowerPoint as well. More specifically for chairs, congratulations to those who are new chairs this year. So there's a little more responsibility, making sure that the town clerk is aware of any resignations. They have to actually formally give a resignation letter to the town clerk, who in turn will let the select board know, and then the select board accepts that resignation. The appointment process, as many of you know, is becoming more formalized in town to make sure that it goes through the proper channels. And then, so the chair also has to make sure that any meeting agendas are put together, is properly noticed, and that's something you work with the town clerk on. And then also just making sure that your members are properly sworn in, that they've done any proper training. And there's more information on that in the town clerk's page. Any questions?
I get a lot of questions about the formality of things, and here's why. So you'll go to a meeting, and you'll discuss something, and you'll take away what you believe that meeting decided or what it was about. And then you may or may not come to staff or the select board or other meetings and then present that view. Sometimes, it's very rare, another member of your board also attended that meeting and they did not agree or did not see the meeting going the same way, and they also come to people and say, this is what happened at this meeting. So the idea of voting and making sure that it's clear to staff and other boards is really helpful, because if one member of a board took exception to another member of the board's view of something, then it becomes messy and it's hard to unravel. So try to train staff to say, I really appreciate you bringing me this information, but it would be helpful to have it in writing or coming from the chair or with some type of vote attached to it. And it's the same thing with appointments. So there is more positions than we can fill, right? So we're very thankful for anyone who volunteers, because honestly, there's just not enough volunteers to do all the things that need to be done. But there are occasions where people do want to volunteer, and maybe they didn't have the option to because a decision was just made because a committee said, oh, this person's volunteering, we'll have them put in. Then that person is a little aggrieved because they didn't know there was an opening or they didn't have a chance. So the formality of the chair saying, here's a vacancy, and then here's the appointment, and us advertising allows it to just be more fair. In those rare instances where feel like they can't access their government because they're not allowed in to a particular group. That's all to say the staff doesn't really care like who you pick or what you do. It's we're just trying to make sure that it's communicated effectively and people aren't yelling at us.
So then I'm moving to director, and he can talk a little more about open meeting law.
I'm gonna stand up because I can't see all of you. Sit down. So I'm Brittany Gallimore. I'm the executive assistant. I also used to work in the town clerk's office, so I have a decent working knowledge of meeting law, ethics, clerk things. So, purpose of the open meeting law: to ensure transparency in the deliberations on which public policy is based. You're here, it applies to you. There is probably no circumstance in which it does not apply to you if you are sitting in this room or on this Zoom. So, OML, the first section, is a bunch of education requirements, because the state is not going to say, hey, you have to follow the law, and not throw in some regulations about how we have to tell you that there's a law. So, within 2 weeks of taking your oath of office, you are supposed to submit the certificate of receipt of open meeting law materials. Wait, you didn't get a bunch of paper materials. What am I talking about? Well, I am talking about the open meeting law guide, which there's a new version because it's 2023, and also the name on the guide changed because our Attorney General is no longer Maura Healy, because she's our governor. There is also the open meeting law determinations database. So the state has a database of all of the open meeting law complaints and all of the determinations that they made of those complaints. So you're supposed to look for violations specifically for your board or your public body for the last 5 years. So you're supposed to sort of have a working knowledge of, did somebody make an OML complaint anytime recently? The actual law is Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 to 25. I would not go read the law, I would go read the guide. Because in addition to the law, there is 940 Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations, Section 29. And that's the, we have to, all of the ways that we follow the law are the regulations, right? All of these materials are on our website. And when you get the slides from Aubrey, you can just click on all of those things and be done. Okay, so most important thing, what do you have to do? All meeting agendas need to be posted 48 hours at least before your meeting, giving the town clerk's office enough time to post. If town hall's regular hours are 9 to 3, and you have a 9 a.m. meeting on Friday, when do you need to send the agenda? Tuesday by 3 p.m., right? Because it needs to be posted before 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning, right? Minutes, the law says it has to be approved in a timely manner. Does the law define timely manner? Of course not. So the attorney's office has decided that it's 3 meetings or 30 days, whichever one is longer. It encourages you to approve your minutes at the next meeting whenever possible. And all documents and exhibits that you use in the meeting need to be as accessible as the minutes. So it often works if you stick them as an appendix on the end, or otherwise have it in a package. If you have it posted somewhere online, you can include a link that says, hey, all of the information is here, but they are equitable to the minutes as a permanent record. And the town clerk's office had written a style guide to help you figure out what you need, what the pieces of an agenda are, what the pieces of minutes are. But OML only counts if it's a meeting. So I don't have to follow OML if it's not a meeting. So is it a meeting? 1, is there communication among members of a public body? If there's communication, does that communication constitute deliberation? Which we'll get to as a vocabulary word in a second. Does the communication involve a matter within the body's jurisdiction? And if so, does the communication fall within an exception listed in the law? So, what's a deliberation? You can read the definition. I can also read it out for you. An oral or written communication through any medium between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. So, within its jurisdiction is an important word. So let's say Glenn, Eric, and Christina, all members of the ESC. They also enjoy handball. I was reading about the Olympics the other day. You all enjoy handball. So the 3 of them end up together talking about handball. Is that a deliberation? No, it has nothing to do with the ESC. Could they even talk about, trying to think of something totally random in town that you could talk about. Could they talk about, that isn't related to the ESC at all. yeah, the environmentability is really, like, sustainability is really connected to everything,
That's
isn't it?
guardrail on Church Street.
Yeah, so like the. General traffic around the rotary, doesn't count as a deliberation because it's not something that's within their jurisdiction. Other things that like wouldn't count, a subquorum. So if you have co-chairs or if you have a chair and a vice chair, and the two of you want to get together to decide what goes on an agenda, that's fine. The two of you can talk, or you and any other single member can talk. Particularly if it's about like the organization of a thing, not so much like colluding votes. Like, right, it's to make government work. That's where there are exceptions. Any distribution of administration, so like you can send out agendas, ask people like, hey, is this a good time for a meeting? Because that's not deliberation, no one cares. And then distribution of reports or documents. However, you cannot reply expressing an opinion. So like, let's say, I'll give a select board example. So Scott wrote, or like rewrote a proclamation against the enhancement expansion, right? So he could send that out. The board couldn't email and reply all about it, right? He can say, yep, this is the thing that I was tasked to do. I did the thing. You can read it, but you have to talk about the thing in public. Cool?
Quick clarification.
Yeah.
So what you described is similar to the way that we do minutes.
Mhm.
So the minute taker drafts the minutes, sends them out to everyone.
Yep.
And I'm double checking if it's appropriate for the individual members of the committee to send back only to the minute taker, who then collates the comments or
Corrections, yeah,
and then puts it, and then we talk about that, identifying what was different from the draft that was sent out.
correct.
That's
Yeah.
all okay?
Yep. All of that is okay.
Yeah.
I'd say if it's typos, you're fine. As long as they're communicating
They're
directly
only
to that person.
communicating the one person back to the drafter.
And if it's brought up in
So-
a meeting,
If it's
Yeah.
substantive, no. If
Yeah.
it's just administrative, meaning like you spelled my name wrong, it's fine. If you
Mhm.
say, well, I think we should have talked about, or I thought we were talking about this, then it's three people. So you-
But no, why is it three people? It's only, you're not sending it back to all. You're only sending it back to the minute taker. And the reason why I want to make sure we're not screwing. And so there are mistakes of all types. There are the typos, like you said, but there's also something where somebody either missed it or misinterpreted something. And we always thought that since it's only going back to the minute taker and the minute taker is only collating these comments, which are then discussed in the meeting as to what it should change. So a draft goes out to everybody. Comments go back only to the minute taker.
Mhm.
And then the minute taker collates them, red line, and then we
Yeah, so
discuss
as
the
long
entire
as you're-
document with the red lines,
Yeah,
yay, nay, and then either approve. So only, and the reason why I want to make sure.
That's the nuance. So
Mhm.
if the person takes comments from two or more people, and they change substantively the sentence, right? So they're like, oh, these three comments combined create this new sentence, you can't do that. You can put all of the changes into one document,
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're doing that.
but people walk the line. So my evaluation is a great example. So the select board can send it to one person, all of the evaluations, and that person can then include all of the comments in a document that goes in front of the select board, but they cannot summarize everyone's comments into a new
Yeah.
thing.
Right,
yeah, so like whoever is writing the minutes cannot be an editor.
correct.
Yeah, so any editing does have to happen in a public meeting. which is
Okay,
what
so I
you're
think,
describing.
you know, with that clarification, I think we're doing it the right way.
Yes, it sounds like
That's
it.
what we want to double check.
There are a handful of exceptions for like, you don't have to follow open meeting law. One is a site visit, as long as you do not deliberate. In Carlisle, there is a tradition of posting your site visits like a meeting. I am just going to leave that there. If you get complaints, we will let you know. If you attend an event and there's no deliberation, like I assume a handful of you at least either have or had kids in the school, you go to a chorus concert, it's fine, right? You can even attend an open meeting of a different public body as long as you don't deliberate. This gets back to that really tight fuzzy line. You can attend as a member as your role. You can attend a meeting in your office. You can even talk in that meeting if you are invited to speak. But you cannot talk about anything that hasn't already been discussed by your board or as an individual. Which is why, like, generally, if the boards want to talk to each other for any reason, we tell you to post it as a joint meeting so that you can actually talk. Because if it's posted as a joint meeting, you can do whatever you need to do, right? You wouldn't be able to make any decision or express any decision on behalf of your board that hadn't been voted on in somebody else's meeting if you had not posted it. Well, the other quasi judicial boards, this isn't you, this will never be you, doesn't apply. Town meetings, because different laws apply. So OML does not apply to town meetings because there's a whole different section of law. You might, however, have an executive session. So there are 10 executive sessions, you have to post the meeting, but the meeting happens in private. There are only 10 reasons and 10 specific reasons. You can see the OML guide to look at all of them. They generally have to do with things that make sense that they would be private information, if that helps you at all. There is still a procedure, and this procedure would have to go on your executive session agenda. You have to open the meeting, state the reason, state whether you'll reconvene an open session, and then you take a roll call vote to enter. And then if you re-enter open session, you announce that too. Any questions? Yeah.
We have never had reason to go into executive session, but if do minutes have to be, how?
So yeah, that's actually a really good question. Minutes still do need to be taken. However, the rules about releasing those minutes are different. So you don't have to post them as soon as possible. In fact, you can't. It's really weird because you have to call another executive session to decide if you can release the executive session minutes from the other executive session, and then it kind of keeps going. So you always have a set of executive session minutes that are never going to see the light of day. Generally, because you have to have an executive session to vote on them. You do still need to have the minutes. There are special circumstances, and particularly think about because minutes are permanent records, right? So you want to think about not Carlisle in 10 years, you want to think about Carlisle in 30 or 50. If they went back, they should be able to see your executive session minutes, most likely, because in 50 years, the executive part probably doesn't matter anymore.
And where do those communicate?
So yeah, so they'd still be stored with the town clerk. It's just they wouldn't be easily accessible to the public. They wouldn't be on the website, they wouldn't be printed for people to look at or anything like that, but it would still be held by the town clerk as a permanent record. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I just want to make a note, before you decide, hey, this is an executive session, can you please check with staff to make sure that it's actually a real executive session purpose, right? Because sometimes folks will be like, oh yeah, that's one. And then we find out with legal, that's not actually the case. So please do make sure.
Yeah, most of you aren't hiring people, and that's kind of a big one, or dealing with negotiation, so.
95% of things cannot be an executive session.
Yeah.
So we get a lot, like, not kidding, well, we just don't want to talk about this in front of people. That's not a reason. And if you're gonna talk about somebody in executive session, you have to put their name on the agenda and you have to tell them. So you can't just say reason number, I don't know, I don't have it memorized, but reason number 3
It's 3.
to discipline an employee or someone or some official is how it's worded. You have to put that name and tell them you're gonna talk about them, and they have the right to go and tell you that it's not an executive session. There's a lot of rules, so. It says ask us, like, that's where most people get in trouble. Of all the things you could do as a volunteer, this is like the one that could actually get you in trouble.
We're gonna get to the thing that could actually
And
get you.
yeah, I'm taking bribes.
So, So OML and technology, tech has advanced much faster than law. None of us are surprised. So file sharing and collaboration software, just do it in an open meeting. It is easy, like literally you can call a meeting for 15 minutes, work on the thing together for 15 minutes, even if it's not like a full quorum of your meeting. Actually, that's not true. You still do need a quorum, but if there are 5 board members, 3 of them are gonna work on a thing, just work on it in an open meeting. And then you avoid all of this. Like the different iterations of a Google Doc counts as deliberation because you can comment, because you can edit, and it's a mess. So this is still in effect until March 31st, 2025. Hopefully they actually make it real law. We'll see. Lobby your legislature. So remote meetings can at least continue through March 31st, 2025 as they currently exist. If it were to go away, it means that a quorum of the public body needs to be physically in person. And then additionally, for the current remote meetings, it means that your public access has to be live. It can't be recorded and posted later. People need to be able to access it the same way that they would in person. Changing public records law. Everything, and I do mean everything you create, is a public record. Wait, my email? Yes, your email. Your email, your text messages, your social media posts, among any other records that you send as a public official are public records. It'll be okay. There is some information that would be redacted, but if you are sending like town information, like for your volunteer position on your personal email account, those emails are a public record. So just because you're using your personal accounts does not mean that it's not a public record. Not worst case, but like, you could get a request for a public record. You could get a request for all emails that you have sent over a period of time about a subject, anything. So 1, you're gonna breathe. And then 2, you're gonna send an email to the town clerk and Aubrey, and then we're gonna handle it. And you're gonna not have to worry about it anymore. Public records law is just a little too complicated. And we don't want you to have to handle it, and you shouldn't have to handle it. And it all has to be flow through the town clerk anyway. So yeah, if you happen to get a request, just send it to us and we'll take care of it.
Who would you get a request from? Like-
Literally anybody.
Okay.
Literally anybody, and particularly in Massachusetts, the request, we can ask that it is in writing. The former town clerk, decided that she would not take requests over the phone. We are allowed to do that, but technically if somebody is physically present and they make a verbal request, we are supposed to fulfill that request. Now granted, there isn't a paper trail, so if they like say we didn't do the thing, it's like, well, paper trail. But yeah, a couple weeks ago, they got one from Iowa. For Carlisle, Iowa, and I told Alana to email them back and be like, ask them if they really wanted invoices from Carlisle, Massachusetts, and not Carlisle, Iowa. Just double check, because we would have to give it to them. Yeah.
I'm aware that some people have specific emails that they use for the town business versus, okay, so. Is that highly recommended?
I would highly recommend that, yeah. So like Gmail, make a free email address. So yeah, if you can make a second email address to just do this stuff, I would recommend it, because then it's all in one place. And if there were a request that did come through, it's way easier to go through one than have to try to redact everything that wouldn't apply. Yeah. Okay. Last bit of law. We're now at ethics, or the conflict of interest law, otherwise known as Ryan's don't take bribes. So You must complete the online training program within 30 days of your election or your appointment, and then every 2 years afterward. Doesn't matter that your term is 3 years, ethics runs out after 2. You must acknowledge that you have received the summary of the conflict of interest law within 30 days and then annually thereafter. And there's a new site for that. So when you get these slides, you can click on the link there. It'll take you to the state's website so that you'll like make a little account. You'll click through the training. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes. You will digitally sign the summary that you received the summary of conflict of interest law, and you're done for at least a year or 2 years. Yes.
Because for the life of me, I can't remember when I last took it. Is there a reminder process or is it up to each individual to?
So it is up to each individual, because the state hasn't gotten that far with their software yet. So Carlisle enrolled in the state's software version, so now we don't have to track it individually. It's all kept like in the database there. Theoretically, there is a back end of that database that the town clerk's office should have access to, but I'm not sure that ever actually happened. Ideally, we would have that access and then we'd be able to send out reminders and stuff, but still working that out. It's relatively new.
Yeah, this was a good reminder, because I had not remembered that at all.
So. Yeah, Meredith, I see
Yeah.
your.
Sorry, so I was, for the Recreation Commission, my term was only like 3 months. So I did all of this, but then I guess was reappointed. Do I have to do it again, or is it?
I would say you probably need to sign the acknowledgements again.
Okay,
But if you did the ethics training, you should still be good. I'm looking at your picture, so I'm looking at you. If you did the training, it should still be good for 2 years, and the OML should still be good. Yeah.
okay,
Mhm. Yeah. So in addition to like the obvious, don't take bribes, don't take things that are hidden bribes. Right? Like recognize that if you think you might have a conflict of interest, there's the State Ethics Commission and they have free resources. So like you can literally call a phone number, ask for the attorney of the day, and they will give you advice on the conflict of interest law, not like legal advice generally, but specifically on the conflict of interest law. Depending on the situation, it can go anywhere from you should file a disclosure. We have disclosures that have been filed in town. So there's a member of the planning board who happens to also own a construction company, right? If there's anything that his company is doing that would have to go before the board, 1, he has a disclosure that that's a thing that's in his life, and 2, he abstains from that discussion, right? You can see more information on their website, and then I threw in the lovely link to the Ethics Commission press releases to look at everybody who didn't follow the rules, because that's really the best example. Like there are civil penalties. It is $10,000 per violation. So if they determine that you've violated multiple portions of the ethics law, it can stack up. There's a lot of ski trips on that list right now. Okay, and now it's back to Aubrey.
All right, thank you. All right, so yeah, don't take the ski trip off this, please.
Or trips using.
Yeah, not even that. Yeah.
Don't take a new bike from maybe a bike I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a trail and trying to approve a trail for a bicycle. Like don't accept meals from the bicycle lobbyists to make the trails better.
Right, yes. So yeah, just kind of generalizing the appointment resignation process. We do have a policy up on Ryan's website, web page, the policy page. We have a volunteer application form for anybody who's interested in any boards or committees. And so then Gretchen will notify the appropriate boards and also the select board. You can choose to recommend, if you're already on the board and you have an opening, if you'd like to recommend that interested person, let the select board know. And then the select board can make that decision. Just to note that for most of these boards and committees, you know, if the select board is appointing authority, right? They make the ultimate decision, so just know that, I mean, I don't see this happening, but let's say you say, we don't recommend this person, they still could technically appoint them, but. Yeah. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, so tonight, plan stewardship committee meeting,
Sure.
is going to be, approving our advertisement, okay, for more people, specifically, associate members. So that it's not the quorum issue. So we were told that the best way to do it is to do, what was it? A notice to the public in the mosquito, but what we call a press release.
Mhm.
And then that way we don't pay anything. Okay,
Yeah.
and so this is all associated with Conservation Commission.
Mhm.
But, so my question is it different for looking for associate members? Compared to?
No, it should be the same, but you know, so, you know, from our office, we'll also solicit and advertise, but I don't like to say boards can't also reach out to, you know, to the public as well. I think
So
that-
let me know if I got this correct. We were going to discuss it tonight,
Okay,
okay, and vote on the wording, all
sure,
right, and then give it to you.
sure, yeah,
So,
absolutely, yeah.
But do you put it in the paper or?
Yep,
Okay,
yep, I can do
so we
that,
don't do
so
anything on
anything mosquito related or anything like that, I'm happy to submit that.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
absolutely, thank you. And then with the resignation process, if anybody says, hey, this is too much for me for whatever reason, if they can submit a formal letter of resignation to the town clerk's office, because they do need to receive that. We'll go from there, because the select board will, accept that resignation, it's just that will start. that.
So, and just a clarification, the select board doesn't have to accept your
Right,
resignation.
they don't
you
have to,
resign.
yeah, it's just,
So,
it's
like,
more, it's the
The
public,
select board is informed that somebody resigned.
yes,
They
they
can't force you.
right, they can't say, no, you're not off it, you're stuck on here forever. But yeah, so it's just more of a formal process, so then we can, you know, formally note, you know, be noticed that there's an opening and go from there.
So the board can't replace someone until the select board is officially
Correct.
Correct, yes.
agreed.
But
to
if
accept
there's
the
a
resignation.
recommendation, you know, make sure they still fill out that application form, but that board can still recommend that person and let the select board know, so that can still be part of their decision process, right?
I'm gonna nerd out for a second, it depends if you're a select board creation or not.
Right,
Right, so the land stewards are a great example, so. Town accepted Mass General Law to allow the Conservation Commission, they're appointed by the select board, Conservation Commission created the land stewards. Who are also appointed by the select board because the appointing authority of the Conservation Commission is the select board. So, a question that gets asked a lot is, can we have associate members? Yes, if the select board says that. Or whoever created you says that you are allowed to have those members, you can, and then. It's the authority of whoever appointed you is the answer, not just the select. We get that a lot.
I have one more question. Can of worms kind of question.
Yes.
The current land stewardship committee charter is nothing like the current land stewardship committee. Okay, because it was made so long ago and nobody really knew the focus on it. Are we a real committee until we, are we a committee now, or do we not really become a real committee until we update the charter?
So you are a committee because you have a charter, right?
Yes.
So there is a charter that exists, so therefore it is a committee. If you would like to update that charter, you may.
Yes,
Any of you
And should.
may. And you should.
yeah,
Like, we should update charters to make them useful.
okay.
yes, make sure that they're current with how many members.
Yes, it's
should be.
on the miss list for tonight.
Yeah, perfect.
And then the select board has to approve it, right?
Correct. If they were your appointing authority. Practice.
The appointing authority has to.
Yes.
So construct.
Select board.
but they appoint. They didn't create the committee.
I know, it's a very,
It's,
a
yeah,
very.
This is why I started with the authority, because it's not an issue until it's an issue.
Right.
Until there's some conflict, and then you say, well, I don't wanna listen to this person, right, then we have to figure out how to undo it. And it's all through where the authority comes from.
So I'm sorry, can you complete that using the land stewards as your example? Because I'm now unclear who appoints the land
The
stewards.
select board does.
Right, okay, and accepts resignations, all of that, even though they're a subcommittee of conscom, the select board is still the.
But let's use a elected board, so the planning board
Yeah,
does not require the select board to approve anything because they answer to the people.
right.
So if they created a subcommittee, it would be them handling the charters and the appointments. It's just most things go to the select board, and they've created a bunch of committees, they have a bunch of children out there, right, so they. It almost always goes to select board, so a lot of people think that they do approve everything, but they don't. Just the things that they approve, which is most things.
Are our charters online?
yes,
Yes.
they should be on your like main page, so if you go to your public body. And if it's not there, then please let me know, so that means that no one ever put it there.
Or if it's outdated, or anything like that.
Mhm.
Any other questions, anybody on Zoom? Alright. So we're gonna pivot to finance real quick, a big thing, asked by the town accountant to please contact a staff person. About making any purchases, if you don't know who that is, please contact the town accountant. That to be getting reimbursed is kind of like the last resort. Let's say there's like an emergency or something like that. But for accounting purposes, trying to make sure that it's formalized and the right account, because what can happen is sometimes we'll get an invoice, no indication of where it came from, why it was purchased. And the town accountant is spending weeks trying to figure out who bought this random item. And now now the town owes, and they won't, sometimes, we can't pay it, we can't tie it to an account. So it's really, really, really important. This slide will give you kind of step by step of what to do, but please talk to the town accountant before you look to get reimbursed. So that's.
Ideally, don't get reimbursed.
Right, yes, it really is for emergency only, so please try to plan ahead for anything that you are looking to purchase.
How does it work for like Sustainability Day? Because there's like a lot of little, like a few copies here, a few copies there.
Right.
So
And
like. That's where like there's a little bit of the planning aspect, but there's also like, if it is a town event, you're allowed to use town resources. So like, they have tap years.
okay, that was just like an
Yeah.
example though, so cause it's like. She knows, Kelly knows that it's happening, but then it's just like, look, it's a list, and here are the receipts and everything's itemized and then it sort of all goes in at once. That's not okay, everything, because you can't really plan ahead for some of it.
So there's two problems. First, it's not always you.
Mhm.
That's doing this, and it might not always be you, and they might not always be as organized. Second, people commit the town to funds before they get approved. So if you go and you buy something and we say no, or it doesn't fit a budget category, or it's flagged for fraud, then we can't stop it. So the pre-approval is important. It's our second biggest risk category too, for fraud, is people submitting for reimbursement.
So even though there's been a budget that's been approved specifically for the event, every individual purchase needs to be approved for that event.
As long as you can 100% guarantee that it matches the vote from town meeting, and the only people that can really do that is staff. Or the accountant, really, because she can say no. She tries not to and she won't. So there are exceptions to this, like the town has to function, but it is a huge financial liability.
So for the Trails Committee, our process is
They're
that
the biggest
we
offenders.
had an open meeting. saying we're gonna purchase something towards a boardwalk. And then they specifically vote to allow a specific person to purchase up to a certain limit. And then they go and purchase that, understanding with our accountant what the right way to do the purchase is. And then after we know the final number, turns out we have 4 accounts. So we then vote that final number to the specific account it should come from, and then all that goes to the account. So that's what we're doing.
Yes.
And there are circumstances where we have to purchase stuff towards a project that's sort of underway, but we try never to do that. We always want to do it, like approve the purchase first at a meeting and go that route, so that there's no ethics conflicts or anything like that.
A lot of this is best practice, so every purchase needs to be deemed acceptable to procurement and to conflict of interest. And Kelly and I are the gatekeepers of that. So ideally, you would prove that and then follow through and say, okay, this person will invoice the town and then we'll give them a check. Or use the town credit card. It's the individual purchase that from the non-staff number that can be. Everyone here is pretty good, right? It's but until they're not, right? Until someone is in a mosquito. Because of their purchases, then
There's like-
the town's reputation.
So conflict of interest could be as simple as, I don't know, anybody got a relative who works at Concord Lumber, right? Like it's nearby, it's useful, they, I believe, are fair, right? So it makes sense to use Concord Lumber a lot of times. Well, if the person that you're sending to buy stuff there is related to somebody who works there, might be a conflict of interest, right? So like it's also those little things to watch out for that happen in a small community because it's a small community.
There's a lot of reasons to resign.
Yeah. Or you can just tell us that you need something and then we'll like figure it out.
We're actually justifying our annoyance, the way we annoy you.
Any other questions on? So yeah, so just like we've already mentioned, just being aware of the budget and available funds. Talk with Kelly, the town accountant, if you have any questions on that. And then just with this in mind, make sure that folks understand that the fiscal year ends June 30th of every year. And with municipal government, we need to make sure that everything's closed for that, because if there's any sort of late invoice, then town meeting has to approve those additional funds. Which is not enjoyable for anybody in finance. So to make sure, you ordered something, help try and make sure that there, that invoice is coming. Work with Kelly, the accountant, to say, hey, I ordered this at the end of June, so there an invoice for this is coming. So that's I think she also heavily emphasized. All right. Finance turnovers, making sure that you are filling out a turnover sheet in triplicate. Make sure that you're turning money over as soon as you can, especially with larger amounts, should be weekly or bi-weekly. And then make sure to talk to Kelly. This is a very brief overview, so Kelly's definitely the person. I'll make sure I have the contact information in this PowerPoint.
This is our number one financial risk. So
Yes, that's, yeah.
if you take money in, it needs to be turned over almost immediately.
Yeah.
And technically, just to confuse you more, technically, if you bring it in to hand it in, you're not gonna give it to Kelly, because Kelly doesn't take money.
Yes, correct.
So you're giving it to Sandy or you're giving it to Anish, because Sandy and Anish can take money. Nancy and Kelly can't take money because financial controls.
Making sure that they're separate for a reason, for, making sure that there's no issues.
Like Kelly can help you like make accounts and things like
Yes,
that.
she can be helpful, but she can't see
but-
that.
When it comes to like actually handing money over, the same way that you can't give Kelly your taxes.
So maybe my imagination isn't good enough, but who takes money in? What's an example?
Trails committee, I will use them because they're right there. They sell the trails book. The trails
Oh,
book revenue
okay.
goes into a special gift account.
Okay, something like that. Got it.
Donations to the COA, anything is purchased cash from a town function. There's not a lot left. We're trying to get rid of them all. And the ones that we do get rid of, people usually get pretty mad about, but this is why.
Cultural council, right, they're taking in donations.
It's why the transfer station sticker cash is going away. as well.
Okay. Another pivot, quickly, as you see, we've got all these new TVs, and we have this new, you know, 2001 Space Odyssey looking thing below the screen, the camera and the microphone and the speakers. So this is a very brief overview. I'm happy to meet any chair or anybody who has to help run a meeting in any of these meeting rooms ahead of time before a meeting, make sure that you're all set. So the way we're doing it now is one option. There's also this little toggle that.
It'll be over there.
Over there, yes, Chris just gonna grab it. There's a couple different ways to share on this screen.
This is the click share.
Yeah, so
So then, too.
I am.
yeah. There we go. So that is in this little basket under the TV for those on Zoom. So if you wanted to just, and that's
This is
the
the Roku remote,
the main remote for everything.
and this is the poly camera, the
Yeah.
camera remote. So
these
this
things-
controls, like literally controls the camera.
So these things are, so you can either, this poly is connected to a computer behind the TV. So you can do it that way. So that's what we're doing right now. I'm using my own Zoom separate. But if you want to just share your screen from your own laptop directly, you can use that little toggle. Now, let's say, so that's the other thing. So let's say, it's not working for whatever reason. You can still plug in, if there's an HDMI cord there, you can use it in the HDMI 4 on this TV. Please do not unplug anything from behind any of these TVs. What's happened in the, since these have been installed, if people pull them in and out, they break, they're not working anymore. So, please leave them as they are. And then if you want all the TVs on showing the same screen, you will want to plug into this corner port there. For those on Zoom, it's just in the back corner here. And just plug that straight into your laptop, and then you can just turn on all the TVs by just pressing the power button underneath and making sure it's all HDMI 1. But again, if anybody wants to meet with one of us ahead of time and make sure you're doing it right before a meeting, feel free. But it's supposed to make it so hybrid is as easy as possible, because it's not going anywhere. anytime soon.
Hopefully.
So the same in the.
Yes, yeah, so we have the same setup in the Hill Room as well now. So.
And the Carlisle.
And, oh yes, and the Carlisle Room has it now too, so we're getting really high tech in all three.
It's a little easier actually in the Hilton of Carlin. There's like an extra step in this room, because that's not like the fancy touch screen.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Hilton of Carlin, you have the fancy touch screen that's like just a giant monitor, right? Here you have to choose for it to be the giant monitor.
True, accurate. So yeah, so it can be a lot, but absolutely feel free to meet with us. You don't have to come here at 7 o'clock at night and feel like,
Yeah.
if there's issues, oh well, so you don't want that to happen. And then this is also very brief overview, so also something that we can talk more about if anybody has questions. I know a lot of boards have their own Zoom accounts. What we have been doing is making sure it's just 2 public Zoom accounts, because it was just, the cost was just exponential.
$27 per license.
Per month, and so it was adding up. So we have condensed it down to 2. Between the 2, you should have whatever time slot you need for your meeting. That should be enough. If there's any issues, absolutely let us know. And then I just didn't want to get the password on YouTube so that I'm not on here. But I can also follow up in an email with the passwords as well. So then to make sure that anybody who needs to set up a Zoom meeting, you'll just have to log in as that. I recommend, what I did is I logged in onto this TV's computer into Public Body 1. And now on my laptop, I'm on my own Zoom account, and so is Brian. So between that, you should be all set. But again, any questions, any issues, definitely let us know. And I think that is it. Oh, no,
So one of the other things that I do is webmaster. So I have submission guidelines to help me help you. If you have a staff member, you can send any like web edit request to that staff member. If you don't have a staff member, send it to me. If I am not available, like if I have an out of office, it goes to Aubrey, and Aubrey will try to help you. And if Aubrey can't help you, she'll try to help. generally, it's just content, there's not a lot we can do style wise, just like keep that in mind, because we're under sort of one brand for the website. Now we're actually done.
Yes, now we are actually done, so I'm gonna stop sharing.
So I can't emphasize this enough, the thing that we need the most from boards and committees and. Some of your new volunteers, some of your chairs are content, so the only thing that residents, they should see more than bad things, they should see good things as well, and the town does a lot of good things, so. Trails is here, but like all the things that you do, pictures and content and information for the newsletter and for social media sites. Allows people to see all the things that government does to, especially the volunteer work, which then makes them more likely to support. Resources, or at least be informed about resources in the future, so the reason why we like to push all that stuff is so people can see where their money's going. All of you are volunteers and are likely at least somewhat pro town. People who aren't, it's because they don't really see all the things that you do, right? And I'm not saying we're trying to convince them, I'm just, it's more information the better for people out there. But we can't force you to send us content, so if you can, that would be great.
Yeah, and I should just make a quick plug that on top of social media, we do the monthly newsletters, most folks know. And I pretty much can put anything in it because it's just online, so any photos you have, any articles, any sort of events you want the town to know, I'm happy to put that in. I've been trying to stay, keep the PTO, library, COA, all of them connected as well to make sure that everybody's kind of communicated together. Long-term goals that make it so there's more cohesion with what events are going on and everything, so everybody knows what's up ahead, and yeah, open to any suggestions and anything. It's fun to work on, and I appreciate everybody who submits every month.
What's the deadline for that?
It is the middle of every month. It's the second Wednesday of every month, so I sent a reminder to all chairs. But yeah, even just citizens in general, if they have any suggestions, open to anybody.
Just curious, do you know what type of coverage we have with the town newsletter?
So I think it's just, probably mostly just volunteers so far. But I think, I do share it with Mosquito, they're aware of it. I think other municipalities kind of look at it because I think more and more municipalities are creating their own newsletters. So try and expand it a little more. Some events have shared more about it, and it seems like more residents are learning about it. It'll never be Mosquito, but it will be, an alternative medium for, town related events and articles. Yeah.
What is the difference between a committee and a task force?
Excellent question. Unless the statute, the Massachusetts general law indicates what it is, it's just a name. The select board has gone through an effort to try and streamline what the names are to make it a little bit easier to understand, but there is no actual difference between task force, a commission, a committee, or board, unless the state law says so. So the Conservation Commission is called that because of Mass General Law. The Transfer Station Action Committee is called that because the select board's terrible at naming things.
Yeah, so like generally, the select board tries to use task force if they think it's going to be like you are going to write a report and then be done.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Length of time.
But they're like, it's all a public body, so all the public body stuff applies.
They're trying to use committee or long-standing things and task force for short things, but that's this board and that could change. We're trying to streamline it a bit.
Back to a really basic open meeting principle, which I think we get together outside of your committee meeting. Is it, so you don't have a quorum, you just have, say you have 2 people that want to get together to work on something that the committee has said we're gonna work on. Can they do that, and can they do that twice?
I don't know why twice would make a
Okay,
difference.
so it really depends on how it was created. Okay, so if
It being the meeting between 2 people?
so if the board, the public body, the public body creates that little group, then it is subject to OML. If it's not for the purposes of just getting something done once. So the issue that we had with the council on aging before is that the council on aging said these specific people would work on this specific reason for this time. That's a subcommittee.
Right.
If two people get together to work on something and bring it back to the board one time, then that's not a subcommittee. But historically, Carlisle has used that exemption in order to get around the open meeting, which is why we were in the mosquito a few times and there's
Yeah.
been a few plus.
So just a different permutation of that. You get together, if the committee says, okay, we need to work on this thing, two people just work on it one time. They bring more stuff back to the committee at large. The committee at large says, that's great. Now we need to dig down a little bit further. Can those two same people go dig a little bit further and then bring that data back to the committee?
It's getting more gray.
Yeah, that's what I thought, so just want to make sure the grayness does not belong only to me.
Gathering though, if it's like just gathering information, everyone's sort of on their own, gathering information to.
If everyone's on their own, you had a very important phrase in there.
But you're off on, if you're on a walk with two other people and you all are on the same committee, you really can't just
Nope.
dissect the.
So it's not a problem unless someone complains. And they only complain when they don't agree with you. Right, so none of this is a violation unless someone says something. So the perception also matters. So you can go to a PTO event as a group, but people are probably gonna wonder what you're talking about. If you're all grouped up as a board.
Okay.
So it's a long way of saying, I think what you described is fine until someone disagrees and they file and you have to change.
Okay.
So our answer is always don't, but there are times when you should. It's more efficient.
With the efficiency factor that. how-
It's not supposed to be efficient, and that's what bothers you.
Yeah.
Right, and I just want to piggyback on your question, because land stewards, it's all about work, right? And it's stupid for any of us to be doing work on a conservation land alone, all right? Because you usually need bigger tools, or you need more effort. And so we always try to work with like little groups of two. So how can we do this without causing a problem? Now, even this morning, two of us met with some knowledgeable person. So it wasn't a meeting, it was data gathering. They just spoke, we just listened. But it's still, not all committees are the same.
So picture yourself as a concerned resident, a resident who'd be concerned about the way you're spending tax dollars as a land steward.
But you're
It's-
not giving any.
That's not true. So the problem is not the two of you doing work. The problem is if the two of you are making decisions about the direction of the town, public funds, et cetera, while you're doing the work. So if you're just there to accomplish a task, there's no problem at all. A task that was decided in the meeting. It's if you
Right.
go to a site and you say, what should we do at this site? You start deliberating on the function of the field and then spending tax dollars, then someone's gonna have an issue with you having a meeting outside of a meeting. So the doing of work is not a problem. So you can do that.
So with the Trails Committee, with Mark and others, they'll go out to a site and go, oh, it's worse than we thought. We really need to spend $300 and not $150 like we thought. Seems to be very counterproductive. You can't have an efficient meeting, and that would be like a transgress against what you're trying to do, meaning we didn't go out trying to spend more money. We went out and found, we have to spend double what we thought. To think that would be a violation of something just seems, not that anyone's gonna complain potentially, but just seems.
So I'll give you that example on the select board scale. If the price of the police station doubled, would you be prepared?
Yes.
That's why the law is written. Your example doesn't make sense, the way that the police station was, but the law is written for the big violation. So the way I would suggest you get around that, because I don't think any file against that or complaint, is that you approve that the people have the authority to to make the decision while they're there. So you can do this project and, you know, we authorize up to, it doesn't have to be that specific, but this funding in order to get it done. And then you're covered. But again, that example, chances of being a problem are almost not immediate.
But we try to actually cover that, so we'll take what we think the estimate is and approve the person to spend usually double that.
Yeah.
And then they have the authority on site to make those calls, that's the whole point of giving work.
The select board often gives me the authority to sign a contract and make administrative changes if necessary, as long as the substance doesn't change. I don't see a difference for your activity. You can make decisions on the fly on behalf, as long as it meets the intent. That's the vote that you're.
Do all votes need to be done in person, by in person, including Zoom, or can there be email votes? I didn't think so, I just wanted to just raise that as a question.
Remote counts, email does not.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that, thank you.
And that the reason is, she said that the public needs to be able to attend it live. They can't attend your email
Yep.
session live.
So. This is a nuancing thing, but
It's all.
say you're in a meeting. And something fails on the Zoom part, okay?
Mhm.
So, like, LSC prefers live meetings, okay? But the people, sometimes guests can't come live or something like that. So if the meeting. If the electronic part dies, but we have our quorum, can we
Stop.
continue? No, you have to stop because
Stop.
the public got rid of the.
You posted it as a hybrid meeting. Therefore, the public needs to be able to access it as though they were walking into a room at any time that you were meeting. If you continue meeting when the public cannot walk into the room in the way that it was posted,
So can we post meetings as only in person?
Yes.
yeah.
Here's one more detailed question. Can two members of a committee exchange emails? Like discussing an issue that is gonna happen, like the real stuff is we're not making any decisions. Can you discuss between two people, like an issue that your board is trying to figure out? Yes. Okay. I don't.
The way a board or committee would get in trouble there is they would say, hey, I was talking to so and so and they agree with me to a third person. Happens a lot.
Okay.
If you start like a thread, we're like, oh, here's the email between, you know, that's when it becomes.
Yeah. Okay.
We hear boards all the time, we're like, oh, well, I'll just call and get a census of the board, and we're just like, well. Can't do that. But we're not the police, right? So all we're supposed to do is advise you. And me in particular, legally, you are endangering the town with your actions, whether you do it or not, I don't have the authority to stop you. But it's usually over controversial topics, and I know that someone's gonna complain, right, and then they sue the town and.
Imagine Betsy Fell is sitting over your shoulder. Like, what is she gonna write?
What would Betsy do?
Any other questions?
Are the slides gonna come to our email?
Yeah. Follow up on that.
Even if we didn't reply to you?
Yeah. No problem. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate everybody joining, both in person and virtually. Any other questions, absolutely let us know, and I'll do it again at 6 o'clock if you want to join again.
Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.